As we continue on our mini-series talking to Paralympic legends, I am maybe the most excited for today's interview because growing up in Tasmania, I just want to say there were maybe 3 household names for athletes in the state. David Boone, Ricky Ponting, and Melissa Carlton. And I am so thrilled to be able to welcome one of those 3 on the show because only one of them's an Olympian. She won 9 medals at the Paralympics, at the Atlanta and the Sydney Olympics. Commonwealth Games gold medal back in Victoria as well, and a groundbreaking gold medal that one was. World Championship medals, world records, an icon of the state, not only of Tasmania, but of the country of Australia and the entire Paralympics. It's a pleasure to welcome to Off the Podium, Melissa Carlton. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Oh, look, thank you for that really lovely introduction, and thank you so much for having me on the podcast today.
You are so welcome. I mean, do you often get introduced in the same sentence as David Boone and Ricky Ponting?
No, not really. And I do totally agree that they are such fantastic household names here in Tassie and definitely, all around Australia. Indeed.
And the one thing that makes me more excited about having you on than those 2, as much as I love them both, of course, but they're both from the north of the state. You're from the south state, and you're from my suburb. You're from Glenorchy. I grew up in Glenorchy. You're from Glenorchy. I mean, there's just all the boxes are being ticked here. You are the first person I've ever had on this show who is actually from directly where I grew up from, Melissa. So I just want to get all this out there because that's how excited I am to have you on the show today.
Oh, look, and I love Glenorchy. It's got such fabulous facilities. So lucky to grow up in that area, and I've been really lucky in recent years to actually serve on the council in Glenorchy. Yes. So very close to my heart and, very, very passionate about the community of Glenorchy.
Not here to talk about Glenorchy politics, but we just had Sue Hickey's new mayor now, right? Did I read that somewhere over the weekend?
Yes. So she was, she's been officially sworn in as the new mayor.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. This is now turning into Glenorchy politics, but I did read that, and it's sort of sometimes hard to follow Glenorchy news when you're in Sydney, but there you go, to sort of date this episode of when we're recording it. But Melissa, we're not here to talk about Glenorchy. We're here to talk about your amazing career. And I kind of want to go back to the beginning where you came to Australia from South Africa. I would love to learn a little bit more about what that move was. What brought about the move from the family coming from South Africa to Australia? And you initially settled in a town called Beechworth in Victoria. So I'd love to learn sort of about how does somebody go from South Africa to rural Victoria?
Oh my gosh, it was such a big change. So yes, I was born in South Africa, and my mother is Zimbabwean. She grew up in Zimbabwe, moved to South Africa, and my dad is Australian. So he was born in Melbourne, and he studied dentistry in Melbourne. And when he graduated from his course, he wanted to work overseas. So he tells the story about how he literally took a globe of the world and spun it around and placed his finger on a spot, and that's where he decided that he was going to go and spend some time.
Wow.
As an early years dentist. So he ended up working in South Africa, and my mum's sister was actually his nurse. So she took pity on this young Australian guy who'd turned up to work in South Africa, and invited him around to dinner, and that's where he met my mum. So,
wow.
So lots of different sort of coincidences or chances happening there. And, we lived in South Africa for quite some time, and I'm the oldest in our family. I've got a sister, Jolene, who is about 18 months younger than me. And then I've got a younger sister and also a younger brother. But when I was 8 years old, the situation in South Africa was getting quite difficult. It was during the time of apartheid. It was quite a violent time in South Africa. And, my parents felt like the best opportunity for us kids and as a family was to actually, migrate to or immigrate to Australia. So we came back and lived in Melbourne for a little while, and, Dad was looking for some work, and he saw a practice for sale in Beechworth. So we ended up living in Beechworth, and, that was quite a huge change for us, going from a country that was, quite dangerous and lots of issues to, spending a couple of years growing up in Victoria. So quite a cultural shock.
Yeah.
But, definitely introduced us to some Australian traditions and some Australian passions. And one of those was sports. And, the first sport that we actually followed when we came to Australia was actually football. So
we're talking Australian football here, are we? Yeah, okay, right. Yes, good,
AFL.
correct, all right.
So,
yep.
My dad's family's got a long connection with Western Bulldogs, or Footscray as they were known in those days. So my first sporting career choice was actually to play AFL. That's what I wanted to do when I was a kid in primary school, growing up in Beechworth. So
maybe a few decades too early there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know, and that's why it's so great to see the women's AFL now. But it was definitely not the right time back then. And at that stage, my school had, realised that I had a talent in the area of swimming, and they were really encouraging me and fostering my talent in the pool. So we lived in Beechworth for a little while, and we almost lived in Dambulla. We almost moved there. And in fact, Dad actually had a job lined up in Dambulla. And as we're getting ready to move, we were watching the TV. It was actually the first televised test match in Hobart. And we saw these amazing views of the city of Hobart. And that's actually what resulted in us actually not moving to Dambulla, but actually moving to Hobart instead.
Wow. Was that against Sri Lanka? Do I feel that was against Sri Lanka?
I don't know, because I was in grade 6.
Right.
And
okay.
I just really strongly remember this story that my dad tells about, the reason why we ended up in Hobart. So
that's a unique way of doing it. The reason I just asked that randomly, because I always have, my dad tells me the stories about he went to the very first test match in Hobart, and I'm pretty sure he tells me it was against Sri Lanka again. I might be making that up. But,
that sounds about right. But I'll check with my dad and see.
Yeah.
But, so that's our sort of journey into Australia, and then what brought us to Hobart. And the big thing for our family was moving to Hobart was just the opportunity to be more involved in swimming. So in Beechworth, gorgeous little country town, but a long way from, the nearest swimming club, and then a long way from any sort of competition opportunities. Whereas, moving to Hobart, and we had all of those opportunities pretty much on our doorstep.
Just one thing I want to touch on, you mentioned AFL, and you kind of answered a random question I was going to have, because I was like, based on your surname, do you go for a very good football club? But as a Carlton fan, I had to ask the question, Melissa. Come on.
They're my second favourite team.
Hey, there you go. That's all right. I like the Doggies. The Doggies are a good team. So.
I think Doggies are always, everyone's second team. Yeah. But we just have this incredibly strong family connection. So my dad's grandfather was actually the secretary of the football club.
Ah, nice.
And he was on the committee that chose the theme song.
Oh, wow.
So I have
Sons
no choice.
of the West. Wow,
yeah, that's
okay.
Right. Yeah. So that's how far back and that's how strong our connection is. So I wouldn't dare go for any other team. But if I did, it would definitely be for Carlton.
Well, I mean, again, we're getting sidetracked on Glenorchy, we're getting sidetracked on AFL, but you're then going to be facing this conundrum like all Tasmanians in a few years, aren't you, about when we get our own team? Because I had this conversation the other day with somebody, and they're saying like, Ben, no, if it's Tasmania versus Carlton in the grand final, you're going to go for Tassie. And I'm like, well, there's going to be part of me, but you got to understand that I've cried so many tears for this football club. It's family club for me as well. Like you grow up, you're so connected to it. Of course we're going to go for Tasmania, but you can't just forget this club that you've supported your entire... I mean, 2016, Melissa, I'm sure you cried happy tears, and that was one of the best days of your life.
I still watch the last 10 minutes of that game, our whole family were gathered together just literally on the edge of our seats, just watching the clock go down and just watching those passages play. But it is a really difficult decision. Clearly we'll be backing Tasmania, and they'll be our team, but not quite ready to let go of the Doggies yet.
You can have two, like I have two teams in the NBA and the NHL. It's possible.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah,
It only
we're
becomes
have to do it. Yeah.
it only becomes tricky when they play each other, and then
Yes.
you kind of you understand kind of where you're going. That and one random question just about your dad, and maybe this is a question you've asked him and he's told you, because I'm always fascinated when I meet dentists, because it's not a profession I hear a lot of little children saying, I want to grow up and be a dentist. So I'm always fascinated to find out from a dentist why they became a dentist. Do you know why your dad wanted to become a dentist?
Well, he says it so that he could. He thought it was a great way to meet girls.
Oh, well,
Really?
really?
To be a dentist. So I'm not sure about that one.
Well, I mean, it worked. You met your mum. You were born.
Yes.
So
yeah. And it has given him an opportunity to travel, and he's had some pretty interesting jobs. When we moved to Tasmania, he was working for the state. So he was actually the prison dentist for a while down here in Hobart, and he was also the school dentist.
wow.
So an interesting combination there.
Yeah.
As well as working for this in the state health system as a dentist.
Very, very interesting. And I guess the thing to point out there too is, I mean, nowadays Tasmania is a destination. People want to live in Tasmania. People want to visit Tasmania. People want to go there. It's on their bucket list. But as I'm sure you've experienced a lot in your life as a Tasmanian, there was a period where it wasn't. You'd come to the mainland and people would almost sort of go, oh, Tasmania, why would I want to go there? And they'd almost sort of look at it, forget about it. So what was it like?
Yeah. I mean, look, we moved down here in 1990, and at that stage, people could not believe that we were moving to Tasmania. They just felt like it was such a backward move from Beechworth, a small country town. So, and even when I, had my first couple of opportunities to compete, being the Tasmanian the team always sparked conversation about Tasmanians and how they were regarded by the rest of the country. Yeah, there was a certain stereotype, and that I competed from 1994 on the Australian team, and I was competing prior to that as well. So early 1990s, Tasmania was definitely not a particularly attractive destination, but we know now just how proud people are to be Tasmanian, and when you have that conversation with people on the mainland now, it's a completely different conversation.
Because, I mean, I always found growing up that, you get to a certain age and, I guess as a teenager, every teenager kind of has that, there's a bigger world out there kind of thought process. But when you grow up in a place like Tasmania, I think it's accentuated a little bit. But now that I've lived away from it for so long, you miss it. You miss so many things about it. You realize how lucky you were to live in a place like that. So it's also that community, that sense of community, which I'm sure you moved into very quickly. You realize that you bump into somebody down the shops, 50 people, right? Like, I mean, you're extra proud. And I think that goes back to my initial introduction of you, Melissa, where it's like, we all knew who you were when you were starting to do well on that stage, because Tasmanians know who the Tasmanians are, who are doing great things out there.
And they're so proud of their Tasmanians who are out there performing, who are achieving, and that's, I think, definitely something that is unique. I'm not sure my my counterparts in other states experience that kind of support from their communities. And I know, like, I've moved away from Tasmania at various stages, but I've always been happy to come home and be with my people.
Exactly. When it came to swimming, so what was it about swimming that it took you to it, and were there other sports as well that you were kind of, obviously you mentioned you wanted to play Australian football, but were there other sports that we could be talking to you today as a Paralympic champion in a different sport maybe?
Look, I think swimming's always been my favourite. I learned to swim at a very young age. It was part of our school curriculum growing up in South Africa, but it was really the one sport where I could be quite competitive with other people, and also was very hard to stand out as a person with a disability in the pool. So being in the water, I really felt like everyone else. So to be able to take my leg off, jump in the water, have a paddle, have a swim, it was almost like I was no different to anyone else in that particular environment. So I think I particularly thrived in that space. And growing up in Beechworth, we did have a local pool, and it was the place to be in the school holiday. So everyone liked to hang out at the pool. So I had strong social memories, as well as, memories of lots of happy memories of being around the pool. And so, started to compete in some of the primary school carnivals, and we got to compete in our regional competition, and we got selected to go down to Melbourne. And I think that was the turning point for me as to when swimming became a much larger part of my life, and actually something that I was setting goals and actually training towards, training for a reason. And we actually got selected in a relay to go down to Melbourne. And that was such a big deal to actually get on the train, head down to Melbourne. We did some shopping, we went to Maya, we went to the cafe. We kind of forgot that we were actually there to compete. So then we ended up having to quickly race to the pool. And I think it was at the pool where I think Collingwood might be based there now.
Okay, yep.
So anyway, we got there, and we're late for our race, and we quickly jumped in and got organised for our race, and we came dead last. But I had such a great time being part of that environment, and the sights and the sound and the feel of actually being part of a major kind of race meet. And that's when I knew that I wanted to do more training and to actually keep on competing and trying different things there. And luckily for us, while that was a bit difficult at first because there weren't really any swimming clubs in our area, and it did mean that my family had to travel a fair bit to Albury-Wodonga for us to train. But when we moved to Hobart, that was much easier. We joined the City of Glenorchy Swimming Club, and that was only like a 5-10 minute drive rather than a 50-kilometre drive to the pool and 50 kilometre drive back. But, football was something that we particularly enjoyed. And I tell this story often when I go out to schools about how, when I started at Edgeworth Primary, I had become quite self-conscious, and I didn't really want people to know that I had an artificial leg. So I would wear long pants or long skirts to try to blend in, or to try to hide the fact that I had an artificial leg. And I tell the story about how, at recess we'd be out playing football, or at lunchtime playing football. And one day, like the ball came towards me, and I marked the ball, and I kicked the ball goes through the air, and then my leg went through the air. And like the teachers coming out onto the oval and making sure that everything was okay. And then from that moment on, they kind of encouraged me more to go into swimming rather than, that's probably a more suitable choice than AFL.
Wow. I mean, like, do you look back on that? Like, you can laugh about it now, but I mean, you're a teacher now, Melissa. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to say that to a student now, are you?
No. But look, I think teachers do have a really positive role on children, and they can really encourage them and motivate them to try new things, or to focus on areas of their strength. And I do, I'm so grateful, and I do remember my teacher from grade 6 who was so supportive and encouraging with my sports and all the different things that I wanted to do.
I mean, it was a good push. I mean, you do all right in swimming, I guess. So, I mean, it's sort of it worked out in the long term.
And I think all of those things from a very young age have contributed to it. So all of those people in my life that have helped me or supported me or, motivated me along the way have played a big role.
You touched on those goals. Was the goal the Paralympics? Was that something that once you sort of got that taste, or?
No, because I didn't know anything about the Paralympics.
Right.
I was the only person that I knew that had a disability.
Wow.
And, within my family, it was a surprise when I was born with one leg. It was completely unexpected. And I think my family had a very strong view that they would not allow it to become a disability. And in actual fact, they really pushed me quite hard to do a lot of different things, and not to give up and not to let my leg prevent me from doing different things. So the Paralympics I didn't know anything about the Paralympics until 1992. So a couple of years after we'd moved to Hobart. And, so I was in high school at that point, and I was actually at a sleepover with some friends, and we turned on SBS, and it would have been quite late at night, and I saw the Paralympics for the very first time. So my goal at the very, when I first got involved in swimming was just to be part of a club, just to be part of a sport, and just to be involved in something outside of school, and just to actually, it was to beat my sister mainly.
It's always about beating the siblings.
Yeah.
I get that.
You talk about North versus South rivalry, but there's that's definitely quite strong in Tasmania, but it's also this sibling rivalry.
Absolutely.
So because we're quite close in age, so we're both signed up to swimming, and we're both quite competitive.
And you beat her all the time, right? Let's be honest, Melissa. Come on. Just say yes. Just say yes.
Yeah, most of the time.
Only one of you has 9 Paralympic medals.
So it really wasn't until much later, and even then there wasn't a lot of information around. So even though the Paralympic movement, it's been around for a while, it wasn't so well known in the 1990s. It was really just starting to, I think, become known, and people would be becoming aware of it. And I think SBS taking on that coverage in 1992 certainly connected to me. And then if you think about so the next games were the Atlanta games in 1996, and there was a lot more coverage in 96.
Which you and I were talking about off air a little bit about this and kind of the history, and I was sort of saying about sort of over the last couple of weeks when we spoke to Michael and obviously Matt last week, it's sort of it fascinates me that this feels like something that's been around for so long, and it's where we're at with it today, but you're talking about the 90s. I mean, that's not that long ago.
No.
And like to kind of think that that's something that's not overly known. And even with somebody with a disability who's very competitive and very good at what they do, I would assume that's kind of hammered home into you. Like, this is what you can achieve, Melissa. Keep doing this. You can go represent Australia. But it's fascinating to me that you turn on SBS late at night.
Yeah.
And then that's what you
just
discover.
By chance. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, nowadays it's very well known. And it's great to see that there are so many role models that are around that are Paralympians, and setting an example for young people who've got different levels of ability. But that certainly wasn't something around in 1992. And you think about that pathway between, early 1990s to now, how incredible that journey's been, in terms of the Paralympic movement, and to see, just what a difference it is, these days compared to, starting out in 1992.
Because that's what I say about you being that real household name. And again, maybe it is a lot of it that as a Tasmanian, we're sort of very proud of our athletes and anybody who goes on out there and does big things. But, we were very aware of what you were achieving and everything. And I remember 1994, the Commonwealth Games. And we were talking about this with Michael Edgerton a couple of weeks ago. He was involved in the sort of the organising of those games in Victoria. But I mean, everything around those games, and that was the first time the Commonwealth Games had included parasports. They were exhibition events, but it was still obviously a first for what now is integrated into the main scheduling of a Commonwealth Games. But was that your first ever real international event that you had gone to, and what was that experience like going to a Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, well, it was my first Australian team. 2 years prior, I'd never even heard of Paralympic Games. So it was a pretty quick turnaround to go from someone who was just competing locally, in Glenorchy and within Tasmania. Incredible experience. And it's interesting because it was meant to be an exhibition match. And from what I understand, there was no initial intention to actually necessarily televise the para swimming events. As we're going into the Commonwealth Games, this is my first Australian team. I was 16 years of age, incredibly nervous, incredibly excited. I'd had a countdown of something like 75 days in advance from being selected, because the trials were actually back in March. And so there was actually quite a big gap, whereas the gap these days is quite small between the selection trials. So I'd had this long period of waiting to go to the Commonwealth Games. And just prior to the Australian team heading off to the Commonwealth Games, some announcements had been made by the chef de mission, so Arthur Tunstall.
Yeah.
He'd made some fairly controversial comments, and it wasn't just about the swimmers with the paraswimmers, there were comments about a couple of other sports and a couple of other athletes.
He was around the flag too, wasn't he? Around Kathy and the flag,
Kathy
wasn't it?
Freeman, yes,
the Aboriginal flag. Oh gosh, I remember that. Yeah.
So he was definitely in the media for making these sorts of comments. And the result of that was that people really, they kind of stood up and sort of paid attention to the events that he'd been talking about. So going into the games, not many people knew that they were paraswimming events, but because of his comments, it suddenly became topical news. And I remember actually arriving at the Commonwealth Games, and there were media there wanting to talk to the swimming team. And I thought, they want to talk to Kieran Perkins and they want to talk to Hayley Lewis and they want to talk to the big name swimmers. But in actual fact, they were interested in the paraswimmers because they wanted to see what our reaction had been to these kind of comments. So it actually drew an incredible amount of attention to us as swimmers. And, as a 16-year-old who'd never been on an Australian team before, that was a lot to deal with. But that message then certainly got filtered back to Tasmania.
Yeah.
And, I think that was quite pivotal in drawing attention to the fact that we had paraswimmers at the Commonwealth Games. So I'm actually quite grateful to the attention that Arthur actually raised about paraswimmers. And that, our event ended up being televised. And I'd never competed against these swimmers before. So, it was a first time for me. I knew that I was in good form. I'd worked with my coach and we're both really positive and really confident about, how I was going to perform and we're confident that I'd swim a personal best time. And it just so happened that the personal best time ended up being, the gold medal for that particular event. So that was quite an amazing first time experience. And particularly as a 16-year-old, I was in grade 11, I was at Elizabeth College and, I remember leaving Hobart and my three best friends were there to see me off. And these were on the days where you could turn up 10 minutes before your flight was due to leave. So, as usual, I was running late, running through the airport and my friends are waving me off. And, as is the way with a lot of swimming events, you're not really away for very long. So I was actually back in Hobart quite soon after my event. And, I remember getting back to Melbourne Airport and I'd spoken to my parents on the phone and, Mum had said, make sure you brush your teeth before you come home. And I thought even for a family that, has a dentist in it, even that's a bit strange. And then, I remember getting to Hobart Airport and they'd actually bussed students down from EC just to welcome me home. So,
wow.
It really changed my life, the Commonwealth Games. And shortly after we got home, they'd announced that Sydney had won the rights to host the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. So it was such an easy decision to go, you know what, this experience in Canada for the Commonwealth Games has just been unbelievable. And I still find it hard to describe the range of emotions that go with competing and being away for the first time. You've got the highlights from the pool, but you also have the memories of what happens in the village and that camaraderie between Australian teammates. We'd felt nervous about being part of the Australian team, so the paraswimmers. We didn't know how we would be received, but we were just so warmly received and just welcomed by all of the members of the Australian team, but in particular the swimmers. They just really reached out and were so, not grateful, but they were just so pleased to have us as part of the team, and we really felt like we belonged.
What an incredible story, to literally 2 years seeing something on TV and then to kind of have all of that like that. That's just insane.
And we'd been, my sister and I had been part of the Civic Hockey squad for quite a while before that. So it's just an incredible kind of, a chance thing to see that on the TV, the 92 games, and then to realise that, my time that I was doing here in Tasmania, I wasn't, particularly successful athlete within Tasmania. I'd swim personal best times, I'd make finals, but I was never really in contention for medals. But that would be, that those times were just, I guess, suitable for national selection. So that was
just shows how good Tasmania maybe was, Melissa. That maybe we were doing bloody well at that time compared to the rest of the world.
And look, we were back then in the 1990s. So we had the Clarence Pool, which had the inflatable dome over it.
Remember it well. It was like a sauna every time you would go there too.
Oh, yeah. And then, everyone talks about the time that the bubble collapsed. And then we had the outdoor pools. So, the only indoor pool was that Clarence Pool. So we didn't really have the best facilities.
Because the Aquatic Centre didn't open until late 90s, early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I think it would have been the 1990s. Early 1990s. So we didn't really have the best facilities, but Tasmanian swimmers were tough. So, they trained under those facilities. So, when it came to competing against other swimmers from interstate, Tasmanians actually did a pretty good job. But we trained under some pretty tough conditions.
Well, you talk about those memories you had going to Beechworth Pool. My summers were very much spent at the Glenorchy Pool. It was a 10-minute walk from my house, and those were always the school holidays. You'd be ringing up your friends. We're going to the pool this, Thursday. Go along there. It was like $2 to get in. Absolutely loved it there. And it's just the way, though, you tell that story, and it connects the dots for me so much, Melissa, about why you were such a household name growing up. Because I mean, to age me, I was 7 during those Commonwealth Games, but it was still, I remember watching Barcelona as a kid as my first Olympics, but it was really the Commonwealth Games in 1994 that kind of ignited my passion for multi-sport events. So that by the time Atlanta rolled around, I was, Kieran Perkins was like on my wall as a poster, I was they were icons to me as a child. But then that makes sense about why you were such of a bigger deal in Tasmania, because there was that attention and everything that sort of came with that. How did you find that added glare on you, the pressure then? So in the lead up to Atlanta, now that you'd sort of, people knew who you were, people were aware of what you were capable of, did you thrive on that pressure? Did it make it harder so that when you made that team in Atlanta, that it was almost just like, this is business now, this is part of my job?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was such a buzz to come back from the Commonwealth Games, to suddenly find my life had changed overnight. But it was pretty much business as usual pretty quickly. So coming home from Commonwealth Games, pretty much back into training for, the next set of competitions. My coach and I had some pretty clear goals about what we wanted to work towards and what the next steps were. And I think I was just surrounded by great people. So, there was definitely times where I kind of, my head would grow a little bit. That's the kind of term my family would use, but we just lived our life very normally. It did involve, I guess, a lot of recognition, and the fact that I've got an artificial leg kind of really makes it a bit easier to recognise me, I guess.
You can't exactly probably say like, no, you're thinking I'm someone else.
Yes, I can't really get away with that. But when you're involved in swimming, and you'd know this from your other guests, there's a lot of time involved in the pool, and so that was my kind of opportunity just to really focus on what my goals were. And my long-term goal was always Sydney. That was what I was ultimately working towards. Atlanta was really, only a year and a half away in terms of selection, and then onto the Atlanta Games. So I think getting back into that routine, but it definitely was a buzz. And I really helped my confidence grow. And I had lots of great opportunities to go and talk at Rotary clubs, and, I spoke at different schools, and, I spoke at all sorts of different, organisations to share my story. And every time I shared my story, it helped me grow in confidence. And, I never saw myself as being someone who could go and stand up in front of a group of people and talk about swimming or talk about any sort of topic. But when you're thrown into it and you have that kind of buzz, it's something that I really enjoyed. And I love telling my story. I love sharing.
That's why you're on the show today, Melissa. Yeah. You're fitting very well there. What was the first day back like at Elizabeth College after you got back from Canada?
It was a bit surreal. I had a pretty small, close group of friends, and after that, I had a very large group of friends, people who I didn't really know, but
those damn hanger-oners,
But they were all, always so supportive, and it was never a negative sort of interaction. And I think. One thing that I do recall from that sort of time is that I think it led to perhaps a different perception of people with disabilities. So I think it helped to change the view that people may have had of people with disabilities and the types of ability that they might have. So I think it helped to shift the way that people saw people with disabilities. And that's what I like to think, that was one of the outcomes from that.
And how important did you take that role on? Like once people are sort of looking at that in a different light, as you're saying there, I mean, was that very important for you to be a real advocate to kind of help sell that message?
Yeah, definitely. And, it's something that I still try to do today. I mean, I don't have all the answers, and I can't speak for everyone. And my story isn't the same story that everyone else has, but I do hope that it makes people think, or it helps people to think differently about opportunities around them, or the way that they feel about people around them. And I typically tell a story of something that happened at the Atlanta Paralympic Games, which is about a particular athlete who people really didn't have high expectations of how they might go. And, that particular individual, ended up winning a bronze medal. But the circumstances of that are quite astonishing, and to see someone win a bronze medal and just be so unbelievably excited and over the moon about that, given that he came from a country that didn't even have swimming pools, so he had all of these challenges that he had to overcome. And to me, that's the kind of story that I like to tell about, don't let other people set your limits.
Yeah, and we celebrate that so much on this show, Melissa, and I constantly am an advocate for, I love watching the Olympics, Paralympics. You see somebody who, works their absolute ass off to even get to an Olympics. They get 27th, but they're so elated because they made it, they did this, they set a time, whatever, and maybe they're more excited than somebody who wins a gold medal. And that's the beauty. And then I think, this is a whole other episode to talk about, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, going to these events, but we do have a bit of an issue in this country where, for example, if, maybe we don't match the medal tally from the previous games, we see that as a failure. Whereas I'm on the page of, if you go to an Olympics and a Paralympics and you come home with even one medal, it's a success. Like, it's just, it's one of these, and we celebrate every athlete who goes, whether you get 20 gold or dead last, you're still at an event. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And it's about people being their personal best.
Yeah.
So if you go and you put your absolute heart into it and you put your best performance, and you walk away knowing that you couldn't have done anything more, then I think that's an incredible achievement. And sometimes that results in a medal, but and sometimes that doesn't. So, as long as you've done your best and you've put everything into it, then you should walk away feeling really proud of that.
Which I feel then very intrigued moving into the topic of Atlanta then, when here we are talking about this and celebrating achievements no matter what, if it's a medal or not. And, 6 medals, in Atlanta, not a bad result. But you say your goal's focusing on Sydney, and that sort of, then Atlanta comes around. I mean, do you then almost say Atlanta's a bonus? Because we often get athletes on this show who will talk about like right now, a lot of athletes talking about Paris was my goal, but Tokyo ended up being a bonus. I wasn't expecting that. Like, how do you reflect then on what you achieved at Atlanta now, considering that almost wasn't your target? You were targeting the next Paralympics.
Yeah, well, definitely I saw Atlanta as a stepping stone to the Sydney Games. And Atlanta was quite an interesting experience because Commonwealth Games was a multi-sport event, but we were a small sort of segment of within the larger Australian team. So the para swimmers were a very small number. So there were 4 of us, and we only represented the S9 category, whereas in swimming, there's actually 14 different categories. So in many ways, we were quite lucky that S9, which is my category, was the one that was actually selected for the Commonwealth Games. So what I found most interesting about Atlanta was it was all athletes with disabilities. And I think there was something like 20 or 21 different sports, and as a huge number of countries. And every single person there had a unique kind of level of ability. And coming from sort of my background, where I didn't know a lot of people with disability, my first sort of couple of days were walking around having a look at people's legs and having a look at people's chairs and, just seeing all the difference. And then, slowly sort of seeing through that and actually seeing the level of ability. So it was quite unusual to see all that in the, in the first couple of days of the Paralympic Games. And then, as I say, it was all then around, each of these athletes and their ability and their performances and just the different sports that they were involved in. But the other thing with Atlanta, which was quite interesting, was we were moving into the village post-Olympics, so Paralympics always being after the Olympics. And at that stage, the Paralympics were still being organised by a separate committee. So you have the Olympic Committee and you had the Paralympic Committee. And as we're moving in, so at the time it was considered to be the second largest sporting event of the world. We had all these different countries, all these different athletes, and they were demolishing part of the village.
Wow.
It was actually kind of such a separation between these two incredible events. And we were competing at the Georgia Tech Stadium. So the swimming was not really impacted. But as the Olympic Committee were moving out, they were taking things with them, or they were, parts of the village were being demolished. So I'm like, this is quite a bizarre kind of experience. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. And part of me thinking in that way was because I knew that in Sydney that it was one committee.
Mm-hmm.
So for the very first time within the Paralympic history, Australia was, just going to have the one committee that would organise both. So, that was something that really stood out to me, in Atlanta.
It's because again, we're talking about this off air and just learning about that history and everything, because Atlanta, I feel, was a massive turning point for the Paralympics, because I believe it was around that time the International Paralympic Committee was formed. I believe it was around that time that essentially the IOC looked at what Atlanta achieved and then were like, okay, we need to write this in the charter that you cannot bid for an Olympic Games without including the Paralympics in your bid. Everything that moved forward, and now obviously it's stock standard. You bid for the Olympics, you're bidding for the Paralympics as well. But it was all privately funded, if I'm not mistaken. There was no state money given to the organising committee for the Atlanta Olympics. Basically, they had to organise this, and there was talks that they were going to shift this to the UK because essentially that Atlanta hadn't factored this in, and very close to this, people in Atlanta weren't even familiar. I think I read that they were more familiar with the proposed youth festival of the Olympics that they were going to do rather than the Paralympics. It's so fascinating. And going back to our point, this was barely 30 years ago, Melissa. This feels like we should be talking about like the 60s or the 70s, but this is the 90s.
Yeah, and it's living memory. It's like living, lived experiences. But to their credit, people in Atlanta, in the first couple of days of competition, there weren't the crowds. It was the families, it was the friends, it was the other athletes that were in the stadiums competing. But as the games went on, those stands started to fill up. And I know definitely within the swimming, by the end of the competition, and swimming it went for the full 10 days. But by the end of it, they were full. People of Atlanta really embraced the Paralympic their Paralympic ideals, and they'd heard the stories of the athletes, and that kind of gained traction within Atlanta, and we started to see more and more people coming along. And I distinctly remember warming up, for one of the sessions, looking up into the stands, and it was full. And they played the Macarena, which I think must have just been released about that time.
Very fresh, 96,
yeah. Very. And, like 10,000 people stood up in the stands and did the Macarena.
Wow.
So, it makes such a big difference when you're competing and you've got that kind of atmosphere and that kind of vibrancy that's happening in the stands. So that's
incredible.
That's the other kind of thing that I remember, from Atlanta, was that kind of turning point that you mentioned, from going from not being particularly well known. And I think the fact that people could see that there was interest in the different sports. I think that gave people confidence in the Paralympics.
And it's a great city, Atlanta. I've been there a couple of times. I love Atlanta. There's just something about it. Did you find yourself able to kind of like enjoy outside of the pool activities, experience Atlanta, experience kind of things, or were you so soaked up in your competition?
Oh, look, we did and we didn't. So we'd actually been to Atlanta the year before.
Right.
And we went there for a test event. So we were actually able to go there and experience what Atlanta was like prior to the games. And like I actually remember, we were staying in the city of Atlanta. So we weren't staying in a village, we were staying in a hotel. And, we got to sort of wander around a little bit. There were places where people said you shouldn't be here. And, I remember going to places like Walmart and just seeing, types of things that they sold there that, you wouldn't find in a Walmart in Australia.
Oh, guns are next to the face washers.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Why not? Moving on. Yep.
Yeah. But during the games itself, we didn't really get an opportunity to go out. The village was pretty well sort of protected from the rest of Atlanta, and you had the residential zone, and then you have an international zone. So to actually get out into Atlanta, you've got to get through all these different zones, and it's actually quite difficult to leave the international zone and go into Atlanta itself.
And I can imagine that was also because of what happened during the Olympics with the bombing. I can imagine security was extra tight.
Yeah. I do remember Atlanta was very much the Coca-Cola city.
I was going to ask, the world of Coke, because I love the world of Coke. Did that exist back then?
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Like they organised a tour. But not only that, Coca-Cola was one of the sponsors, and they gave every athlete, and I don't know if this was the same for the Olympics, but definitely for the Paralympics, and I still have these. They gave us a little pouch about the size of a postage stamp, and inside there was a coin that you could put into any Coke machine and get free drinks.
Wow.
So all throughout their village, they had these Coke machines. And I think actually all throughout Atlanta as well. So you could actually, and I wish I had it here to show you because it's actually one of my treasured possessions. Like I have that up there with my medals.
I wonder if it still works. What, have you been to Atlanta since?
I've tried it. I haven't been back to Atlanta, but I have tried it locally, and I did actually have to get them to open up the machine so that I could get my coin back. But it definitely worked in Atlanta. So not the healthiest thing to be drinking when you're competing, and certainly you can't have too much of it.
I reckon
caffeine.
you ever get a chance to go back to Atlanta, that's on your bucket list. See if it still was. That's incredible. I if you want to send a photo of that after this interview, and you by all means do it, Melissa, because I'd love to see it.
Yes, I'll have to find it because, like I say, it's something that I've kept.
My memory of the world of Coke is I'm a competitive man. So when you get to the top floor and it's the tasting station, and they're like, there's 120 flavors from around the world. I'm like, challenge accepted. I'm trying every single one. I was very sick that night, as you could imagine. So,
well, I don't know how you go with your drug testing either. It might be a little bit too much caffeine there.
Can't say as a non-Olympian myself that I've been drug tested that much in my life. But had I been, I might have been a little bit in trouble. But 5 medals. You touched earlier about your coach's goals, setting goals. Were goals medals? Was it to performance stand? What were those goals, and how did you tick them off coming away with 5 medals?
Yeah, look, medals were definitely not the primary goal. I knew that my times were very competitive, and I knew that if I swam personal best times, that there would be a good chance that I'd be in with the medals. I knew also with Atlanta that there was actually a much larger pool, so to speak, of swimmers. So Commonwealth Games, it's Commonwealth Game countries. I knew that in particular there were some strong Americans and some strong Canadians, some ones that I hadn't competed against at Commonwealth Games either. Very hard not to get distracted or worried about, the other competitors. So it was really just about my game plan, what's my focus, what am I there to do, what's my race plan. So my race plan was always, the 100 metres and the 400 metres were my main events, and about personal best time. So getting below a particular time. And gosh, it's been so long now, I can't even remember exactly what my goals were. But at the time, I had it written down on a bit of paper, and I actually had it in my bedside table. So I knew that, this is what I'm aiming to. And, I was lucky at times to, to reduce that time to say, I want that to be a little bit faster now that I've swum these particular events. So I knew that the 400 was ultimately my best event, but also I knew that the 100 metres, that's the blue ribbon. So even though the 400 was my best event, the 100 was the one that I really wanted to do, particularly well in. And I think that's probably due to the Commonwealth Games being a 100-metre event. So my first event.
You get the gold in the 4, you get silver in the 1, and you also get a gold in the 4x1, a silver in the 100 butterfly, and a bronze in the 100 backstroke. One thing that I found in the last couple of weeks between Michael, Matt, and yourself is that para swimmers are much better than swimmers, able-bodied swimmers, when it comes to diversifying between the strokes, because I'm thinking of like a Kaylee McEwen, she's a backstroker really, right? Like Emma McKeon might do a bit of butterfly, freestyle, like kind of those ones. But, between yourself, Matt, and Michael, you're doing 3 out of the 4 strokes. Like, I mean, this is like the diversity goes along that way. I mean, you guys are just better swimmers, I'm saying right now, Melissa, because you're able to do more.
I'd like to think that. But I do think that as the movement progresses, and I think we'll probably see as the competition really ramps up, I think we'll start to see people specialising in more and more specialising in a particular stroke.
Did you have a favourite? Like, was it freestyle? Can I use that as a guess?
Yeah, freestyle was definitely. Butterfly helped my freestyle. So by focusing on, or by spending time working on butterfly, obviously that upper body strength helped with the freestyle. And backstroke, I was okay at backstroke. I was never great at backstroke. Breaststroke, no, I just went round in circles.
That's what Michael said the other week. He said that breaststroke was the one he couldn't do.
I could never get my foot right. Like I could never actually get the angles correct. So breaststroke was not for me. But definitely,
if I'm not mistaken, Matt Levy last week said I think it was butterfly from memory that was his that he couldn't do. So
okay.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I think, maybe from a young age I'd always been a freestyler, and the longer distances really suited me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you see in the Paralympic Games is you have all these different classes. And it's not so much people competing against people with the same disability. It's people competing against people with the same ability. And so being a leg amputee, I might be competing against, someone with cerebral palsy or someone with spina bifida or an arm amputee or something like that. So where my strengths were the upper body. That's where I was strongest. Whereas events like the 50 and 100 rely on leg strength. So you're, that's sort of more of a sprint type event. So the 400 was, where I was the strongest. But back here in Tassie, it was the 800 was one of my pet events down here. And we would regularly, each year we'd have the open water championships. So we would have the 5K event up at Lake Trevally.
Ah, right. And you were beating able-bodied swimmers, weren't you, for quite a period of your career in those events, if I'm not mistaken?
In the open water, I was quite competitive because of the upper body strength. And over 5 kilometres. I mean, gosh, I've got many different memories of swimming in Lake Trevally. So depending on, it could get very cold up at the lake.
And now we just see with dark mofo, everyone's nude salsa swings and everything like that. But that's just a standard day for Melissa Carlton swimming. Not saying you're nude. I'm saying more of a case of you're just used to those waters, right?
Yeah, but look, not these days. I prefer like a nice indoor pool with 28 degrees.
Going along that way, which I mean, it's just it's fascinating to kind of think around. I always talk about when we talk about the Paralympics, the thing that I love watching and just get blown away is what you're saying there about the different classes and how, as an uneducated person before ever doing this podcast and being able to be lucky enough to speak to you and other people, is that I can watch an event and go, well, how is this fair? That person's got both their legs, both their arms. That person's only got one, and it doesn't seem fair, but obviously you explain it there. It kind of comes down to the ability and everything along those lines to kind of balance it out because, they're not going to make it unfair, are they, for certain athletes who potentially,
Classification is very complex. And I know that this year they're going to be releasing some new information about it, but it's definitely about putting you in a group of athletes that have got similar ability. So rather than focusing on disability, where it might become quite narrow. So they're really trying to create a really competitive field. So I think classification is a great thing. And it can be really confusing, but the principles are around putting you in a group with people that have the same level of ability. And I think that's such a positive thing. And swimming just does it so well, and I know the other sports do too, but the way that athletes with disabilities are now incorporated or involved in so many national swimming events, and the classification system enables that to happen.
I want to move on to Sydney because obviously, we're going a bit long here and I want to get to that sort of the experience there. But the one I'd like to ask with the 2 gold that you get in at Atlanta, can you hold one higher than the other at all? Because an individual and a relay are both so unique. Like as a swimmer, you don't often get to swim in teams. Like it's a very individual sport. So I can imagine that's a very unique experience. But then to achieve a gold in an individual event, I'm sure is the work and hard effort and everything, it pays off. Can you compare your 2 gold that you did get in Atlanta to each other?
Oh, it's so hard. To be selected for a Paralympic Games, that's quite an honour and quite an achievement. And you would have seen, the Australian Championships earlier this year. It's not guaranteed that you get selected. Even if you are the best in your category, you actually have to make a qualifying standard. But to be selected in a relay on top of that that's an even greater honour, to be part of the relay team and to be, being alongside 3 other people to up against all of the other countries. I have just, and I'm so proud of those medals within the relay. So it's really hard to kind of say one's better than the other. We were really up against it in the relay too. So I feel like it came down to 4 people having their best performances on the day versus my individual gold medal where it's just up to me. And I can only, it comes down to how I perform. So to have all 4 of us do so well and to actually win that medal, I think that's going to be really hard to beat, and to be able to stand up on the podium with the other athletes to accept that medal and to, I don't want to say I've got a favourite, but if I did say I had a favourite, I would probably be the relay medal.
And you beat America in swimming.
Yes, yeah, and that's and we're very much there's such a strong rivalry there, as you can imagine. So
yeah, that carries on into para swimming as well. That rivalry still there.
Definitely.
Good.
And yeah, in the Australians have a few rivalries with a few different countries and different sports. If you look at the wheelchair rugby, it's the New Zealanders and the Americans. So yeah, each sport has its own kind of rivalry, and it's great if you do get that opportunity to be able to go and support the Australian athletes when you have some downtime. But it is quite hard for the swimmers because the program is quite long. Like it generally covers the entire the Paralympic program because of the 14 different sort of categories.
It's longer than the Olympics, isn't it? That's over within a week where you're the entire schedule at the Paralympics.
Yeah. So we do get a bit, I remember getting a little bit envious of some of our other teams who got to finish quite early in the village and then get to enjoy some of the village life, whereas us poor swimmers were going the whole time. But it was great to have them because they all came along and supported us at the pool.
You touched on what your coin being a treasured possession, and we always like to ask our medalists on this show, Melissa, what they do with their medals. What do you do with your medals? Not just your Paralympics, all your medals you've achieved in your career.
Well, my mum organised to have this beautiful case
Nice.
made up. And it has positions for each of the medals from the different games. It's sitting under my desk empty at the moment.
Oh, right. As in empty because the medals are somewhere good? They're getting cleaned? They haven't been stolen, have they, Melissa? I hope.
No. Look, at one point I thought they had been stolen, but I'd actually just left them in the back of my car. It's going to sound terrible. Look, I treasure those medals.
Mm-hmm.
I do have them in a little bag that I have ready to take out to school. So particularly, in a Paralympic year or an Olympic year, I do get the opportunity to go out and visit a lot of different schools and different groups. And it's so nice to be able to take their medals along and to actually show them and to actually hand them around the room. So they do have a few scratches, and they
I was going to say they have to. That's the thing. Any Olympian or Paralympian who has a medal will say that they're not meant to be shiny. Like if they're shiny, you're doing something wrong because you're handing them around to people. Yeah. They've got to get wear and tear, right?
Yeah, and they, the ribbons come off on one or two, and I put it back on. So they've definitely had an interesting life. But it's to actually be able to go and show them, particularly the Commonwealth Games medal, because it's actually quite a beautiful design, as is the Atlanta medal. So that's quite large. And then the Sydney medal is quite special too because it's exactly the same as the Olympics. So it kind of symbolises that shift in the Paralympic movement where it became one organisation, or it truly became parallel, which is what Paralympics is. That's actually what it stands for. Mm-hmm. So yes, I have them in a little bag, ready to go out. They are individually wrapped, but they haven't gone into their special case yet,
being operated. Here's something, and this isn't a question I expect you to know the answer for. It's more of a case of I'm sure you'll join my campaign with this one, Melissa. We know that in the Olympics, if you win a gold medal, you get a stamp. Why do our Paralympians not get a stamp?
Ooh, so do you mean like Australia Post?
Yeah, so like if you win a gold medal at the Olympics, the next day you get a postage stamp, and they've put this across to our Winter Olympics too, so it's not just a Summer Olympics thing. But my only reasoning is because maybe we win a lot more gold medals in the Paralympics than the Olympics, so that's possibly why. But I still think if we want, same billing, equal rights, everything along those lines, our Paralympians should be on postage stamps as well if they win a gold medal.
I'm with you on that one. I think we need to write to someone.
Exactly.
But I think that's a great idea. And look, definitely the amount of recognition that Paralympic athletes have been receiving is increasing all of the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the really nice things that's happened this year is that Australian Paralympians, have all been honoured with a pin. It's almost like a baggy green. So every athlete, in order of selection from the very first Paralympic Games.
You have your number.
Yes.
So what's your number? What number are you?
I think it's like 425.
Wow.
Maybe 435. Yeah, so it's quite low. So I attended a ceremony recently, and I couldn't attend the one in Launceston. So we had a lovely online ceremony.
Great.
And they brought all the athletes who hadn't been able to attend a local ceremony online, and were actually able to kind of share some of our stories and be presented online with our actual pin. So I think that's it's nice recognition, and it's quite similar to what I think athletes receive in other sports. So we're definitely seeing more and more of that.
I love that. I think cricket maybe was the real enforcer of things like that, but I know, say, like the Socceroos and the Matildas do that. I believe the Hockeyroos and the Kookaburra. I mean, many sports will do it and kind of say you are cap number whatever representing Australia. I know that the Olympics just gone, the opening ceremony blazers had the names of every Australian Olympic gold medalist emblazoned in there. So, I love things like that they can kind of honour that and kind of, legacies in all sports. And that's a great that they're able to do that, because I have seen a few Paralympians at the time of recording this, they're sort of sharing their pins. So
yes.
It's kind of it's a great thing with that. Sydney, I mean, look, you worked your butt off to get to that one. That was the goal. You've got great footage on your website. You touched on the Commonwealth Games. You've got the race up there on that one, but you've got the footage of the opening ceremony, and you can see you there in Stadium Australia, loving life every single second. I mean, how can you summarise a home Paralympics? Because that is the one for me as a kid, that was the Paralympics. That was, I knew what they were. This was, a big deal. ABC did a great job covering them back in the day compared to, what we used to get. I mean, it just must have been an incredible experience.
Look, and you talk about the opening ceremony, and I was actually so excited when I saw that footage. And it was actually, that footage was recorded by my mum, and it's from VHS. So it's been
look that up, kids. Look that
up. When the opening ceremony was something that I'd visualised, so it was something that I had in the back of my mind, particularly when times were a bit tough. what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it sound like walking into Stadium Australia, wearing the Australian uniform, surrounded by, Australians all there to compete? And it was nothing like what I dreamt. I knew that it was going to be exciting. And the thing with hosting home games is you're the last country to walk out. And I think in Sydney, there was something like 125 countries competing, which was the largest Paralympic Games. So we had to wait for 124 other countries to march out before us. So it was literally hours before it was our turn. And as swimmers, we had to choose. We didn't have to go to the opening ceremony because we're pretty much competing the next day. But why would you not? It's to me, there was no other option. Anyway, so we decided that we were going to walk out in nice straight roads and not look at all excited about what we were doing. And we were in a stadium next door to Stadium Australia, and then they call you up and you go in the race. So you go in underneath the stadium and then you sort of pop up on the field, and we could just hear the crowd getting louder and louder and louder as we're getting closer and closer. And there's 110,000 people in the stadium. They've just seen all of the other countries. And, as we're emerging from the race, we just totally lost it. We were just totally amazed and just almost brought to tears about just the response that we were receiving. And I still feel quite emotional about it now. And you can see, there we all are in our uniform. And I think Mambo designed our uniforms.
They did,
yeah. So we look pretty cool.
They were great uniforms. Great. Sydney were great uniforms. Yeah.
Yeah.
You retired at the right time because Athens were shit. So we won't talk about them. Yeah.
So, walking out into that, and that was just quite, nothing. It wasn't even close to what I'd imagined. It was just so much better than what I'd imagined. So,
because I don't think we've had a stadium Olympics or Paralympics as big as Stadium Australia since then, because obviously the capacity of Stadium Australia now is reduced. They took 30,000 seats out after the Olympics, but 110,000, as you mentioned. Beijing, I think, was 80. Athens, I can't remember. London definitely wasn't. Yeah, no, I think that's still the record of this millennium at least. And Kylie Minogue at the opening ceremony, didn't you? Yeah.
Yes, we did, yes.
Because I know she did the closing of the Olympics, but I remember she came back for the Paralympics. So.
And she's a huge fan of the Paralympics, and she actually came into the village and she actually...
Did you meet her? Did you meet Kylie?
No, I didn't, but some of the other swimmers did. It was just such a thrill. And we had many, many celebrities coming through in Sydney.
Who'd you meet, Melissa?
None. I didn't meet any of them. I was always in the wrong spot.
They wanted to meet you and you were too busy. that's what it was.
Talk to my people.
Yeah.
So I mean, Sydney, the life in the village was incredible. We were the home country. We had the largest area in the village. It's so hard to sort of put into words what that was like living in that, living in the village. So it was actually like a suburb, and it was connected by these little golf buggies. So these little trains. So there were no cars in the village. So to get anywhere, you had to jump on one of the little golf buggies. And I just remember sort of, heading around the village on one of the golf buggies and heading off to the food tent where, all the meals were served, and you just sitting next to, such a variety of people. So just an incredible experience to be part of that Games Village. And again, they had the residential zone, and then they had the international zone. So you couldn't really go into Sydney. So within the international zone, they had nightclubs, they had all the kind of entertainment services. And so you could actually go out there, and it was all Paralympic athletes or people involved in the Paralympics. So we kind of had our own little suburb, our own little city.
Which, having lived now in Sydney for a while, I know how far away bloody Homebush is from Sydney. So you want that, right?
And look, I remember after the Games, people were just so amazed at the performance of the Paralympic athletes that we had a ticker tape parade.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that being a very big deal, that kind of there was because, I mean, for people who don't know, Australia topped the medal tally for the Paralympics. And we've talked about this in the last few weeks, but just about that vibe, because Australia was on such a high after the Olympics that as soon as the Paralympics rolled around, it was just yes, we want more of this. We're addicted. And often, as I'm sure you join the many people who say, the Olympics is just a dress rehearsal for the Paralympics, right?
We do say that maybe. But look at the Paralympic Games. It was the first time that it was a sold out Paralympic event. and the organising committee did such a fantastic job of making the tickets really affordable. And if you had a ticket, you could go and see any sport you wanted. So you could, start off with swimming, go out to the athletics, go and watch some goalball, check out some basketball. I think when I got to finals and those sorts of things, tickets might have been a little bit harder to get hold of. But the other great thing that they did was brought schools to the Paralympics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really had a great impact on young people to see the Paralympics, and particularly young people with with disabilities. And actually, at the games, they had a program which Uncle Toby's actually sponsored at the time, and that was Big Sister, Little Sister, or Big Brother, Little Brother. So Paralympians were paired up with young people with similar disabilities.
Wow!
And it was kind of a pen pal arrangement. So I had
Great.
a young girl who lived in Melbourne who was my pen pal, and she got flown up to go and watch the games.
Oh, fantastic.
And, it was a huge moment for her and a life-changing moment for her. And she actually went on to compete in Paralympic Games.
Oh, fantastic.
She went on to compete in wheelchair basketball. But for her, she said it was the first time that she realised that being different was normal.
But that must make you feel like, sorry to interrupt with that, but just to, particularly that she goes on to compete, like that you must have been such a driving force to kind of help her get, that must, compare with all your achievements that you've done to see that you've helped that person go on and give her a shout, name drop her if you want to.
Well, yes, maybe. But, she's definitely, and being able to see the to actually go to the Paralympics and see such an amazing array of athletes who are competing. And that was, it might have been the pen pal arrangement that got her there in the first place, but it was her experience at the games. And she said, that basically people were asking her for a autograph because they saw that she had one leg.
Wow.
So incredible. So I think that, the getting those school kids along and getting and people like Australians just love their sport. So they just came along and they really just embraced it. And they took every opportunity that they could to actually, watch as many of the Paralympic sports as possible.
Because I believe it was outside of the Sydney Olympics, it was the second largest event essentially Australia had ever held, and was only eclipsed by the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne a few years later. Because, people might be saying, well, you had the Olympics in 1956, but obviously the Olympics in 1956 are much different to what they are today. But, it was a big deal for Australia to kind of have that off the back then of the Olympics, and just the fever, which, this is kind of a question without notice, but I'd just love to hear your thoughts in general. Do you hope that we can capsulate that for Brisbane? Because, the build-up for Brisbane, we're not going to get into what's happening with that, but it's more of it's not quite the same vibe, right? We're obviously a lot further removed than we were from Sydney, but we're all aware of what that was like in this country in the lead up to Sydney and how excited we were. It was something different, and not to take away from Brisbane, but I just feel we're not on that level that we are for Sydney. So do you hope it kind of changes and that become 8 years?
I think as we get closer, I think, 2032 seems a little bit, far away for people at the moment. But I know people are starting to talk about it. You know, definitely I hear about it at school. Kids are starting to talk about 2032 and starting to put that on their radar. So, I think at the moment it might feel like it's a little bit too far away or not going to be as exciting. But I think definitely as it gets a bit closer, we're going to see it ramp up, and I think it will, it'll be different, but people will definitely get behind it. People will definitely get excited about it.
Hopefully they'll get a bloody stadium at some point and we might actually be able to have them. Just two things to sort of wrap up there with Sydney. Ultimately you get 4 medals, 2 silver, 2 bronze. How do you reflect just generally on the performance? Was this another one where you sort of set goals or anything along those lines? Kind of looking back on it now, 24 years later.
Oh, and look, I definitely had some goals for Sydney, and I actually achieved those goals. The silver medals, like in the 100 metres freestyle, that was the fastest I've ever swum.
Wow.
And all 3 place getters broke the previous world record.
Wow.
And it was literally like...
Can't be disappointed with that.
No. And, I couldn't have been beaten by a better competitor. Stephanie and I had been competitors for such a long time. But it was such a small margin between gold and bronze. Like, you couldn't tell. Watching that race, you couldn't tell who had actually come first, second, or third. And I'm really proud of the way that I swam that. And I wouldn't have been able to swim that fast without those two girls that I was competing against. So, I mean, that's the best that I had in on me on the day. And, I actually do look at that medal with, quite a sense of pride.
Well, you get just to chime in. I've got to drop the Canadian name here with Stephanie Dixon. I mean, one of the all-time greats, of course. And for our Canadian half of this show, Colin, if you're listening, there you go. Canada can beat Australia in swimming. So let's just point that out there.
Such an amazing athlete. Total respect for Stephanie. And it's this. I guess Sydney wasn't really a time where Facebook was a thing. So we kind of lost contact, but I'll always feel feel very strongly connected to Stephanie. So I didn't come away with the gold medals, but I came away having achieved my goals and having swum the fastest that I've ever swum in my whole entire life. And to finish off at the Sydney Paralympic Games, and the time was right for me to retire. I was at university. I was starting to have a think about, life after sport, and definitely with Paralympics, I think that's a bit easier because there isn't the money in Paralympics. It's not a job. It's not a career. You have to have plans for when you retire. And I was very firmly thinking about what that next stage of my life was going to be. And, I was pretty lucky at that point in that I was studying teaching, but I was also working for councils. And so that sort of opened up a whole range of really exciting opportunities to pursue once I finished my swimming. But I was ready to retire.
You answered my next question. I was about to say, was Athens ever on the agenda, or that was it? The goggles were done.
No, yeah. Look, it was just another 4. I didn't have another 4 years in me because I did have to move back to Hobart to finish my training, whereas university for me was in Launceston. So I
no one wants to go to Launceston, do they?
Yeah, well, we had a pretty good time at the uni in Launceston. I must say it was a great university lifestyle, was great fun, which is why I had to move to Hobart to with my training, because I couldn't quite manage the uni life and training in Launceston. And I was pretty much one of the oldest on the swim team as well. So, and that was such a great way to end the Paralympic Games, having swum the best times I'd ever swum in my life. Had some great competitors, some great battles, against some pretty well-known names. So, it was, I often think, could I have done it? But I know in my heart I wouldn't have had another 4 years, the sort of 13, 14 times of training a week. It's time to move on, finish my degree and get a job.
Do you get a bit of FOMO, though, when the next Paralympics roll on? Are you watching Athens going, I'm missing this?
I do, and I often have a dream before the Paralympic Games of me standing on the blocks getting ready to compete, and it just feels so real. But also I'm thinking, I haven't done any training. I remember thinking that in my dream, but I do miss that experience of being on a team and travelling and being part of that exciting environment. I do miss that. But I have been very lucky to be involved in lots of projects and lots of other sort of opportunities post swimming that I would never have had if it wasn't for my swimming career.
I was going to touch on that. I mean, quite successful admin career outside of with the teaching as well, and obviously going into council and everything. I'm starting to get a bit of a trend though that Paralympians and politics is a thing. Matthew Cowdery, he's an MP now, if I'm not mistaken. Talking with Michael a few weeks ago, the great Chantal Petitclerc is a federal senator in Canada in the Trudeau government. So, I mean, it's just, what is it about Paralympians and politics, Melissa?
Such a good question. I wish I knew the answer to that. Like, I feel like my swimming has connected me closely to community, and I feel like I have met a lot of people through swimming, and I feel like it's a trust. It's a relationship where people feel like they can talk to me and that they are confident that I'm going to represent their views. And that's certainly how I felt with council. And I was on the council for about 4.5 years. So I had a term on the council, and I really felt it was that community connection. And I think people felt connected to me, and I think I felt like I was able to really represent or, be their voice around the council table. And I enjoyed being on the council. It just became a bit of a challenge with my teaching because it made it harder for me to be available to the community. given how structured a school timetable is. So as much as I miss it, I know it was the right decision to not restand and to allow someone else. But I do feel like we did make, we made a difference during that council term. But no, definitely, there are some amazing Paralympians out there who represent their constituents or their local communities.
Two last questions for you, Melissa. The first one, please say no comment if you don't want to answer this because it may be controversial. I don't know. But if you're still on council, the Glenorchy pool would still be open, right? Let's be honest.
Look, the Glenorchy pool, oh my gosh, it is such a big topic within the community, and communities need pools. Like we've talked about how important it is to have a place where people can go and spend time with friends. They can be part of a swimming club. The Glenorchy pool needs serious work, and it's a cost. So I'm really glad.
You're such a I love you. As politicians now, no, it's fine. I love it. I love it. It's great.
I worked at the Glenorchy pool as well, so I worked for the organisation that managed it. So I'm acutely aware that pool was a post-World War II pool. It's a war memorial pool, so it's one of the last of its type. There needs to be a replacement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what I'd be advocating for.
And it should be renamed the Melissa Carlton Pool. Why wasn't it renamed the Melissa Carlton Pool?
Oh, no, they don't need to name anything. But, look, I think there needs to be a replacement. So, and it just comes down to that conversation of it's such a big thing for councils to fund.
Yeah.
And councils can't fund these things on their own. So there has to be, I guess, a mature conversation around where does that money come from and then who funds it going forward, because the public can't, the public pays to use it, but that doesn't cover the cost of running it.
Yeah.
But the public don't pay for soccer fields or, other recreation too. So, it's a couple of different conversations that need to happen because I think it's an investment in community.
I'm not a ratepayer anymore, so I don't really have a say. I've been a ratepayer in Glenorchy City Council for some time, but just had to check in,
I think it's important for communities to have pools.
Yeah.
But that pool is it's going to be difficult to keep that particular pool running. There needs to be a replacement.
Great memories of that pool.
I know. I have so many fun memories.
Yeah.
There were some pretty cold mornings there.
I can imagine.
The heater didn't always work.
Good old Glenorchy. Yes, and that one. The last one I want to ask you, as a teacher, are the Olympics and the Paralympics like your most favourite time every 4 years? Because, I think one of my biggest things about Atlanta that I remember being when I'd been 9 back then, so what would that have been, grade 3, grade 4, whatever it would have been at the time. But I remember that period, our teacher just having like 2 weeks of just, choose a country, come in and talk about your faith. Like it was 2 weeks of just school activities and learning about the Olympics, which didn't get to do in Sydney because, of course, everyone was off on school holidays during the Sydney Olympics. So that never was the case. I was in high school by then. Newtown High weren't doing that. But, do you just turn this period right now for your students? All right, scrap everything you're doing. We're doing Olympics for and then the Paralympics. So a month worth of sport.
Oh, look, I think we can't quite do that. Like it's a pretty crowded.
Yes, you can. Don't tell me that. You're a teacher. You're in control.
No, we definitely make as much room as possible for Olympics and Paralympics. Where, the last games we had Ariane Titmus, and so we made a big deal of having the screens up around the school, and it really brought everyone together. So
because she's Tasmanian, everyone. Let's remind her.
She is.
She's not Queenslander. She's Tasmanian. Come on.
And same with Max.
Yes. Yep.
And it actually brought the school together. We actually, and the timing was quite good. The time difference. So we'd be actually sitting in our assembly hall or our common rooms, and we'd have the big screens on, and there were just people that didn't really know each other. There were teachers there. The whole school community was sitting there watching those races, particularly when it came to people that we knew, like Ariane. Yeah, yep. So we'll definitely, and now we've got the 2 Tasmanians this year in the swimming.
Yeah. Maximilian, what a name, right? Maximilian.
Oh, I love it.
What a name.
Another Southerner.
Yes.
So we'll definitely be watching it, and we're definitely going to be doing things around it, and it just lends itself well to different areas of the curriculum. Definitely in the primary school, more opportunities, but I'll give you the tip. My classes will be watching a lot of Olympics during class time.
Great.
while they're doing their classwork.
Well, yeah, well, you know.
And Paralympics, you know, I love showing the wheelchair basketball and the wheelchair rugby and things like the goal ball, which they might never have actually have heard of, but it just kind of, you know, really interesting and very strategic and very, very competitive sport. So, you know, I like to build it in as much as I can.
I mean, like, it's a stupid question to ask you. Of course, I know who you are, but even if they didn't, there's a little thing called Google, so it doesn't take long. I'm sure every student nowadays Googles their teacher. But, I mean, do they come and talk to you about things? Like, do they ask you questions about your swimming career?
Oh, some of them do. Like the kids that I teach, their parents are kind of my age or a little bit older or a little bit younger. So their parents kind of have you know, they have that sort of knowledge, so they might talk to their students, or not their students, sorry, their children about it. So yeah, I do get a few kids asking me about it, you know, and they're quite fascinated by it, and they're like, oh, you know, wow, that's, I had no idea.
We always like to find that out about the teachers and that as well. You would have been interviewed by Ariane Titmus's dad. You would have been interviewed by Steve plenty of times, I can imagine, in the 90s, right?
Yeah, definitely. And because of you know, I worked at Launceston Aquatic. So I was there in her early days where she was starting out with swimming. So
you saw her from a very young age. Or did you teach her? Let's say you taught her. Come on.
No, I can't take that credit. But,
Tasmanian icon to another. So, yeah. Wow.
I know Steve is an incredible guy, very, you know, I've done a lot of interviews with him in the past, and he's always showing so much interest in my swimming, but in all of the kids that we train with, and he really helped to promote the sport of swimming and every single opportunity. So it's so nice to see him on the TV, enjoying enjoying the success of and celebrating.
As he should.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, you know, it's really random. You know, obviously we talked a bit off air about the fact that you and I have been Facebook friends for many, many years and haven't really had much of a conversation over the years. I'm friends with Steve Titmus on Facebook for many years, and I can't say, even working in the media in Tasmania, I don't actually ever remember having a direct interaction with him. But as every Tasmanian in the 90s knew, they grew up with him in their living room every single night, right? So, you know, obviously we love him, we love Ariane and everything, obviously, that she's achieved and is achieving still out there. Melissa, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on, learn about your journey. I mean, we could continue this on for another 10 hours. You've got so many great stories to tell, but it's such an honour to hear it and everything along those lines, and from one Tasman, not just a Tasmanian, but from one Glenorchy-an. What's our collective term for a Glenorchy person?
Glenorchy-ite?
Glenorchy-ite.
I'm not sure.
From one Glenorchy-ite to another. It has been an absolute privilege. So thank you so much for your time and joining me on Off the Podium today.
Oh, look, and thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy.